Go.
Let's just start off by talking about the facts, what's happening here in Illinois. 8.6% unemployment, $100 billion of unfunded pension liabilities, $7 billion of unpaid bills. The last thing that we need is a tax increase. We're going to hear a lot about fairness today, but what is being talked about in the so-called progressive income tax is a major tax increase. The problem in this state is that we're spending too much money. Budget increase from 33.7 to 35.4 billion. In 31 out of the 33 states that have a progressive income tax, the tax rate is higher than the 3 3/4% rate that will be in effect next January. So flat tax is fair. Let's look at a person who's making $1 million a year. Under the current system, under the 5% rate, they're paying $50,000 a year. Somebody who's making $10,000 will pay $500. The flat tax is a fair system. Our problem is that we're spending way too much money in Springfield. We don't need to raise tax rates.
Well, thanks for having us. As much as I love my friend here, I have to disagree. So a flat tax is not fair. The reason why it's not fair is it's regressive in the same way that a sales tax is regressive. And what you end up when you combine sales taxes, property taxes, the pass-through taxes on paying for a gallon of gas or other goods and services, the middle class in Illinois right now pays twice as much as a share of their income compared to the top 1%, some of the folks that Dave just mentioned. Now, why does that matter? It matters for a couple of reasons. The biggest is that when you look at surveys of businesses nationwide, they will tell you that after the cost of health care, which is still going up, the number one issue they have in creating new jobs is lack of consumer demand. So when you have a system, and a fair tax system would in fact do this, where you put more money back into the pockets of the middle class working folks who are going to go spend it at the local grocer, we're going to go spend it at the local pharmacist, you are actually stimulating our economy and also creating a system where there is more fairness. This is the right thing to do. If you suggested doing a flat tax nationally, you'd be to the right of every single Republican in Washington, D.C. So this is just fair. And fundamentally, what we're saying, first of all, is we currently, because of our Constitution, don't even have the option to say we as a state, we as voters, would like to see millionaires taxed at a higher rate than minimum wage workers. We don't even have the option. So the first question is, can we get something on the ballot that says we want to have an option to choose fairness? And that's the question we're dealing with today.
Representative Mitchell, this is a tax increase. Isn't the whole idea here really to raise more revenue for the state of Illinois?
There is not a rate structure out there that does not lower tax rates for 80% of working families. It's just not true. And part of it is because what we're talking about here is marginal tax rates. We're talking about an additional rate, even if it's 9 or 11%, whatever it is, on the millionth dollar of income that someone has made. We're not talking about marginal rates below that. So that's part number one. Part number two is when we talk about business environment, we need to be more holistic in how we discuss it. Illinois actually has a very good environment for business. We have a higher median income. 60% of Illinoisans have education beyond high school. 30% have a bachelor's or more. 11.5% have a master's or greater. We have unmatched shipping and logistics. We have great telecommunications infrastructure and financial resources. And part of the reason we do is because of investments that a previous generation made in education, in workforce development, in infrastructure. These are all the things that create a strong business environment. And we are currently underfunding education by $1 billion. We have a massive percentage of our roads and bridges that are structurally deficient. So not only are we not investing in the way that we perhaps should, the real question is, for folks who are saying the tax rate is going to go back to 3.25%, find me that $5 billion in reduced spending. If pension reform saves $1.8 billion, which is aggressive, if we've already cut $1 billion from Medicaid, tell me which early childhood education program are you going to cut. Tell me which workforce development program you're going to cut. Tell me how you're going to get to a place where we're not underfunding and cheating our education system. That's the fundamental question.
Good morning. Christina Rasmussen, Illinois Policy Institute. Christian Mitchell,
yes.
Are families in your district rich? The average typical family in your districts makes $61,000 a year. Using the rate and bracket structure proposed by the very sponsor of this constitutional amendment would have that typical family paying $153 more in income taxes next year under this plan. Can you tell us the breaking point for what you consider to be rich? Who should pay more? Because every family in Illinois is slated for tax relief next year. At what point do they become ineligible or unworthy of tax relief, in your opinion?
Wow. Well, that was a question out of the Americans for Prosperity playbook. Look, the answer on that is I've been very clear. In every rate structure that I've seen or that I would consider worthy of support, and to be clear again, there isn't one, because the first question here is whether or not we can do it at all, and just about every one of our surrounding states can, would lower tax rates for everyone making less than $200,000. So there's the very simple answer to your question. Every rate structure that I've seen that I think is worthy of support would lower taxes for literally 80% of working families, including the family you just talked about, who is currently paying more than the top 1%, some of my rich friends, because of the pass-through rates on paying for a gallon of gas or going out and buying some groceries. It's very simple, right? If the tax on gas is $1 and you make $10, you're paying 10% of your income. If you make $20, you're paying 5%. This is the same principle of why our flat tax system is currently broken.
Lawrence Massal with the Civic Federation. Thanks for being here. I think you both sort of articulate sort of the challenge to get a consensus on how big Illinois' problems are and what's going forward. But just taking a small part and building on what a couple other people have said, other states tax retirement income. The federal government taxes retirement income. In Illinois, no matter how much you make in retirement, no matter what its source is, that's tax-free. As we see an aging population in Illinois, would you support sharing the burden for all of these debts that we've built up? And if you believe that we've been undertaxing people in Illinois for many years, would you support taxing retirement income?
I don't support taxing retirement income. It's the same reason. I believe, again, that the problem in the state is we're spending too much money. And I support many of the recommendations in your report in the way to cut spending, but I don't want to raise taxes.
Look, I think that part of what gets us in trouble in Washington, D.C. is kind of the Grover Norquist pledge about what one will or will not do. So what I will say is my concern there would be making sure, similar to our issue with the flat taxation problem, that we take into account what folks are making as we consider a structure for doing something like that. Open to it, but I really think the question would be how do we protect working people who don't have a lavish retirement, especially given some of the retirement changes we've already made in the state. But that said, as part of a broader package whereby we're making sure that those that have the most are paying a fair share, I think everything should be on the table given the deep and abiding financial crisis we have in Illinois.
For each of you, what is the likelihood that we will see a progressive tax this year in Illinois, or the starting of one?
I hope unlikely. I've been leading the fight against the adoption of this tax increase.
But what do you believe will happen?
I believe we're going to defeat it, but we're going to have to all work hard to make sure that happens.
I believe Dave's going to owe me dinner. I believe we're going to get it done. I think the voters are going to make the right choice after we get it on the ballot.
And what is the likelihood of the current tax, which is supposed to be temporary, becoming permanent? Representative
There's going to be a
McSweeney.
major attempt, and unfortunately, from the perspective of policy in the state, there's 71 Democrats in the House. So I will lead the fight on that one, too, as with many of my colleagues. I think it would be a disaster to extend that tax increase, but that's the next place they're going to go. And it'll probably be in January. Now, let's be clear what we're talking about here. It's right a few days before new members are sworn in. We have what we call a special session. It means only a majority vote is required. A lot of members will be retiring, so I'm very worried about that, frankly. It'd be an absolute disaster, and I plan again to oppose it.
I think the impetus of this moment is creating a real desire to have a fundamental discussion about tax reform in this state, and I think that both elected officials and voters are going to realize that we have a chance to cut taxes for 80% of working families while still raising the revenues that we need to make our state function, and I think that's why folks are going to choose to go with a fair tax proposal.